Hi, everybody, and welcome to Experian Talks. And in this episode, Experian Talks Gambling Harms and Financial Support. And I'm thrilled to be joined by Raminta from GamCare, who will be helping us understand and talk about gambling harms and what that means and how to get the right support. And I'll be able to help talk about how gambling harms or gambling addictions can impact your credit report and your finances and some of the things that you can do to protect yourself. So Raminta, thanks for joining us. Really pleased to have you here. Do you want to just do a quick introduction and tell people who you are and what you do at GamCare?
Sure. Thanks for having me, John. So my name is Raminta Diliso and I work at GamCare. GamCare is the leading national charity that supports anyone affected by gambling. And in my role as financial harm manager, I work with many different sectors, including banks and debt charities, to help these organizations identify and support people affected by gambling.
Excellent, thank you. So for everyone watching, this episode will cover a lot of information, a lot of questions we've had from people sending us information or from GamCare as well about how certain things might affect your credit report, but also just how to get the right support. And also for friends and family of people who are affected by gambling harms, then I think we'll cover some good content for you to try and help you understand how to navigate what's probably quite a difficult time and difficult financially as well. So we'll be talking about a lot of credit related issues as well and how it might affect your credit report. And I think the important thing we'll say at the outset is that if you're suffering from a gambling harm, and Raminta, you'll probably cover this a lot, which is about getting the right help, but the right help has to be appropriate for you. Whether or not that might impact your credit report for a short term, I think it's important to make sure you get the right tailored support. So we'll jump into lots of questions and go through. And the first question we got, so I'll fire this straight over to you, Raminta, which is, I guess for you in GamCare, how do you support people affected by gambling harm?
Sure. So as I mentioned, GamCare is the leading provider of information, advice and support for anyone harmed by gambling. So we're here for people who gamble themselves, but we also support those who are impacted by loved ones gambling. We run the National Gambling Helpline and it is available 24/7 all year round. And you can contact us on a free phone 0808 80 20 133, or you can access a web chat on gamcare.org.uk. Our advisors listen, give emotional support and guidance, and they can talk you through some tools and strategies to help you control your gambling. We also offer treatment services, including cognitive behavioral therapy. And we never judge you. We keep these conversations confidential. And John, I would just like to add that you don't need to be referred to us by a GP or another organization to get support. And you don't need to be severely impacted by gambling harms. Just reach out to us. And we encourage people to get in touch early before the problem escalates.
Yeah, great. That's good to know. I think one of the things that I notice and sometimes comes up through the free debt advice sector, and I work there, is people sometimes wait a long time before they seek help for a problem, whether that's a financial problem or not. I mean, I guess your words of encouragement there is, if you feel you're getting a bit of an issue, or even your friends and family might think that, they can contact you. Is that right? At that kind of point in time, you don't have to wait until, you've got kind of the wolves at the door with financial issues or family
Absolutely.
problems.
Absolutely. And it doesn't have to be about debt and money. If you feel like gambling is negatively affecting some other areas of your life, maybe your relationships or your mental health, just get in touch and we're here to support you.
Okay, that's a really good point. But one of the things that I think we're highlighting is the impact of a gambling problem. Now, one of those, I think, if we kind of try to take a look at what a gambling problem looks like from a credit reference agency perspective, we can see a financial impact from that. And that could be taking out credit to fund a gambling habit. So new accounts, and it could be expensive credit. We don't see the cost, but we see the kind of types of agreements that you'll take out. But also, if you can't afford to repay that, and I guess we're getting down the line of struggling to repay credit that you've taken out, it could be late payments, it could be defaults, it could be county court judgments, or even debt solutions if you've sought help. So things that could have a real impact on your credit report. We'll talk about these in a short while. But Raminta, from your perspective, there's obviously a lot more to what a gambling problem looks like.
Yeah, you're right. So financial harm is one of the biggest ones, and we speak to thousands and thousands of people on the helpline and in our treatment, and around 7 out of 10 people that come to us experience either debt or other financial problems. But also gambling is known as a hidden harm, and people can experience gambling problems for decades and still appear to be leading normal lives without any physical symptoms. But it's more than just about money. We hear from people who are feeling isolated because of their gambling. They haven't spoken to anyone about what they're going through. And it can lead to anxiety, stress, and depression, and affect family and friends too. It can cause breakdown in relationships. People lose jobs, their homes, their families. And unfortunately, in some cases, people end up with criminal convictions as well, as they commit crimes in order to continue to gamble and recover funds that they've lost. As I said, it can affect so many areas of your life. Someone preoccupied with gambling can lack the motivation to maintain their relationships, engage in social activities, and it can really increase that sense of isolation and make it a lot harder to get help.
Yeah, it sounds quite scary, but I think, we'll say this probably as we go through this, but no, I guess anyone in that scenario should contact GamCare for some support. Now, one of the things actually you mentioned, I'll just jump on, because you said 7 out of 10 people have some sort of kind of financial difficulty because of gambling. Do you offer that kind of support in terms of rehabilitating your finances at GamCare, or do you partner with anyone to help people who've suffered any kind of financial harm because of it?
Yeah, so because, as I said, debt is one of the key issues that our service users have. We signpost them to free debt advice services, and
Great.
we work with organizations such as PayPlan and Step Change. And we know that they help many people with their gambling problems, and they're quite skilled at that. So for someone worried about their gambling and their debt, I would just say it's important to address both issues at the same time. But if you do come to us, we'll let you know where you can go, and vice versa. The debt charities that will help you with debt will be able to signpost you to GamCare too.
Yeah, great. And we do a lot of work with a lot of these free debt advice providers as well. So just like you said, PayPlan and Step Change, and also Christians Against Poverty, Citizens Advice Bureau. There's lots of them, and we'll try and link them as well in the description so people can find them if they need them. And I think the one thing which just came up, and a theme here as well, is, don't be worried and don't be afraid to go and seek help if you need it, because the earlier you get it, the better, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of stigma around debt, and people are not even aware that free debt advice services are available. Many people are not aware that gambling support services are free and available here in this country. So it's really great that we're doing this video to raise more awareness of this support.
Super. Yeah, I agree. So look, let's say, I guess if someone is at the point where they admit they've got a kind of gambling problem or a gambling issue, how can they voluntarily protect themselves? Are there certain things that someone could do today to stop themselves from getting into further harm?
Yeah, absolutely. There are lots of tools available. So you can control time, money, and access to gambling venues and websites. So if you'd like to manage your gambling and stick to certain time and money limits, all licensed gambling operators in Great Britain must offer you help to manage that. But if you'd prefer to stop gambling completely, I can talk you through a self-help toolkit. So the first thing is ban gambling blocks. And these are offered by a growing number of banks and card providers. And they give you the option to block gambling transactions through merchant category code blocking. So these features are usually accessible through your online banking or your app, and you can find the list of all the banks that offer this feature on GamCare website. Now let's talk about blocking software. So this is the software that limits access to websites or apps across all your devices. So your phone, your tablet, your laptop, PC. Gamban, I would note, is probably one of the most popular and effective ones, and it blocks access to all the gambling websites. And you can get a free license for Gamban if you contact the National Gambling Helpline.
That's good.
Now, the other thing to remember is there are various self-exclusion schemes. So you can self-exclude yourself from various operators, whether online or at physical venues. So you can ask the gambling business to stop letting you in, whether it's online or in a betting shop, in a casino. But there are also multi-operator self-exclusion schemes. GamStop is one of the biggest one for online, and all operators licensed in Great Britain have to be part of GamStop. You can self-exclude yourself for 6 months, 1 year, or 5 years. And the service is completely free, and you can find out more information on gamstop.co.uk. John, I would just like to add that it's really important to have those multiple layers of friction. So a combination of blocking software, self-exclusion schemes, and ban gambling blocks, as well as accessing professional support, will really help someone to control their gambling.
Okay, super. There's lots in there. So I'm just going to say, I mean, you could rewatch this, but you can get all of that information in your toolkit, can't you, about how to help yourself through all those different methods.
Yes, gamcare.org.uk is the website where you can find the information about all these self-help tools. Just a question on gambling blocks, John. So our helpline advisors are often asked about gambling blocks and how that shows up on a credit file or a credit report. They're worried that any potential lenders may see it. So I just wanted to find out if there's any truth in that.
Yeah, that's a good question. So actually, in terms of credit reporting, we don't see transaction-based information. And the other thing that we don't see is anything related to gambling. So, I mean, the first thing is, if you're spending money on gambling, we don't know that. We wouldn't know that, you've taken out a credit card, for example, and spent that money on gambling. Actually, you can't do that now, but
no, you can't.
But let's say taking out a loan, a high cost loan, and you spent that on gambling. We wouldn't know that, but we'd know you've taken out the new agreement. But then anything from a gambling block perspective, that wouldn't show on your credit report as well. The one thing that we will talk about, which I think we'll talk about soon, is Experian have launched fairly recently, actually, just last year, a way to block yourself from taking out new credit to fund your gambling habit, which is a notice of correction on your credit report. So we'll talk about that in a short while, but that's the only thing that would show on your credit report. And that would have, if you added that note to block yourself, you could reference gambling, but you don't need to. You can just reference a note to say, please do not give me new credit. But everything else wouldn't show on there. So you've no need to worry about it being divulged that you've spent any money on gambling or not, which I guess is a good thing and a worry off some people's minds.
Yeah, that is really great to hear, because I know some people may be reluctant to use gambling blocks because they worry that if they'll be applying for a mortgage, say, and the potential lender will be able to see the use of those blocks, that it may have a negative effect on their application. So that's really great to hear. And another question on GamStop, which is an online self-exclusion scheme I talked about. I know that to verify your identity, they need to run a soft credit check. And does that leave any footprint on your credit file at all?
Yeah, it actually doesn't, no. So easy way to think of it is you have, as we know, a hard search and a soft search, what we normally call them. Soft searches are never seen by anyone else other than you checking your own credit report, and you'll see them in there for a year. Hard searches are what's seen by other lenders if you apply for credit. They also stay on there for a year, but hard searches are applications for credit. Everything else is going to be a soft search, and that won't show to anyone else.
That's really good to know. Thank you. Thanks, Matt.
Great. Super. So we've got some questions actually while we're talking about the financial issues, which Raminta, you've kind of sent through to us as well. And one of the questions that you sent through was around the financial impacts and on credit reports, so around missed payments and so on. And one of the questions particularly around getting a mortgage and whether gambling shows up on your credit report. So we've covered this a little bit already, but actually gambling itself won't show on your credit report. But what will show, it could be the effect of gambling. So what I mean by the effect of gambling is where you've taken credit to fund your to fund gambling, or whether you haven't been able to repay credit. So there's a few things that can happen. Now, the first is if you can't afford to make your repayments to any kind of credit agreements, you'll start with missed payments showing on the credit report. So they'll have a fairly reasonable impact on your credit report, fairly sizable impact on your credit report. And that means you might start struggling to get new credit at that point, at least at good rates. So then you kind of move to a position where you might be taking credit that's a bit more expensive. But if you continue to miss payments on any credit agreements, what could happen is your accounts could go to a default status. Now, default status is probably one of the most serious things on a credit report, where it's effectively closed by the lender and with an outstanding balance on there. Now, that's quite a serious thing, and that means you'll also, you won't, you'll still be able to get credit, but again, it's probably going to be quite high cost credit at that point as well. So if you've got any of those issues, you'll struggle, I think, to kind of get things like a mortgage or other types of credit, but at the best rates, so the most competitive rates. So what you might be doing is paying a lot more for your credit. So I would definitely say at that point, if you're having missed payments or you're taking out new credit, particularly to kind of fund gambling, then that's the point where you definitely need to seek this free help that we talked about earlier, with GamCare or going to a free debt advice provider. So that's really important at that point. Just gambling, it won't show on your credit report because we don't see the transaction. So no one will know how you've used your credit, but we'll know how you repaid it and whether you did that on time.
So for someone in recovery, how many years would they have to wait until they can even consider applying, say, for a mortgage?
Yeah, that's interesting. So there's no fixed time, because it really depends on an individual case of what's on your credit report at that point in time. So if you've got some missed payments or even a default on there, like I said, you might struggle to get the best rates on the market, but it won't exclude you from credit. You could still get a mortgage. You probably want to look through a free credit broker or a mortgage broker to help you look for something like a mortgage, or use comparison sites to help check your eligibility for credit products before you apply. That's always a good tip anyway. So there's no particular time, but as a general rule, now if you have a default on your credit report, it lasts for 6 years from the start date of the default, but it has a less of an impact as time goes on. And a lot of things stay for 6 years. So payment history stays for 6 years, for example. So you do have a window of time, and you can refresh your credit report if anything negative does happen. And even if it's just a period of missed payments, I mean, the good news is that once they pass a year into the past, then they start to have much less of an impact on your application. So there is a definite way to recovery, and it's not like as soon as there's negative information, you'll be, blacklisted, because that doesn't exist, but you might struggle to get credit in the same way. So it's always good to have a look around, and these soft searches we spoke about, that's a good way to look for credit using the comparison sites to see what you're eligible for.
Great. That's really useful information.
Yeah. Super. So it's probably a good time, because we've got some new Experian support, which I think is probably a good time to go into a bit of detail about, particularly while we're talking about protecting yourself financially or taking new credit. So Experian launched last year, in 2020, we launched a new scheme to help protect anyone who's suffering from gambling harm to stop and try and prevent themselves from opening new credits to fund their habits. So usually at that point, it could be very high cost credit. It could be credit that you might not be able to afford to repay. So we'll link it in the description, but we've got a new page which you can get all the guidance and support on adding a notice of correction to your credit report, which advises lenders that you do not want to get credit even if you apply for it, because you might do that. And we know that, anyone suffering kind of gambling harms or addictions might do that, at some point in the night when they're trying to get some instant high cost credit. So this will stop that process. And anytime you apply, a lender will check this note, see it, and they shouldn't give you any credit for it. But the good thing as well from this new support scheme, trying to block new applications for credit. So, a lender's giving you credit, but it will stop instant decisions. So you won't be able to instantly go out and do it. And the reason for that is it's always referred to someone. So someone will always have to look through this application, check the notes, see what it says, and then make the decision from there. So it's a good bit of breathing space for someone who's kind of actively hunting for credit at that point in time.
Yeah, I think it's really great that this option is available. I talked about multiple layers of protection and how it's important to have as many of those as possible. And it feels to me that the notice of correction is yet another layer of protection to protect yourself from getting into further problem debt. And our service users, especially someone, for example, in a higher earning job, they are offered credit limits more frequently, and they feel like by all this access to credit, they're getting into further debt and further gambling problems. So I think this is a great way to block yourself from further credit. That is something that we're trying to promote on the helpline as well, and raise awareness.
Yeah, super. So again, by the way, I think you can find that information on GamCare and the Experian.co.uk website. And it's free to do, by the way. So, you could just add that. If you're worried about whether you'll take credit, you can just add that. And again, it's, yes, just as you said, Raminta, it's an extra block to, getting yourself into further financial harm. So you might use your banking blocks and you might add a notice of correction so you don't take new credit to do it. But I think the more the better, I think, if you're struggling. But one of the things we spoke about earlier, very briefly, is just about friends or family. So if this, is there anything friends or family can do to, I guess, get help for someone or support someone? I mean, they can come to you, can't they, I think, for advice?
Yeah, so we're here for anyone affected by gambling, whether through their own gambling or someone else's gambling. And I would just like to say that if you're worried about someone else's gambling, it's really important that you don't ignore the problem hoping it will go away. Excessive gambling can affect many areas of your life. I talked about people feeling stressed, anxious, isolated, and in some cases it can lead to suicidal thoughts. So do let them know that help and support is available. Free debt advice is available. There is a way out of this situation, and we help thousands of people every year to build their lives back and get their lives on track and get over their gambling problem. So yes, like I said, we help family and friends too, and we'll support everyone. Do give us a ring on 0808 80 20 123 or visit gamcare.org.uk.
Great, that's really useful, because I think one of the things that we know, we've done this work on gambling, but we often can see, I guess, the very serious consequences of leaving a gambling problem or having a gambling problem. And you mentioned some of them there, but particularly where it leads to, suicidal thoughts, for example. So I think that just kind of highlights the seriousness of it. So I'll reinforce what you said, which is, contact GamCare. If you want your Experian block on, we can also offer, we can also direct you to support services as well. But definitely, free advice, free debt advice services exist, and we'll try and link those in the description as well. But, getting this help, just like you said earlier, Raminta, it's non-judgmental. So, nobody is going to judge you for having a gambling problem, but they will try and help you deal with it in the best way possible.
And if you know someone struggling with gambling, one advice that we give is do not lend money to them, because as difficult as it may be to say no, remember that bailing them out can make the problem a lot worse. And also make sure that the gambler doesn't have access to substantial amounts of money, for example, through accessing a loan or remortgaging their house. Especially for those connected to the gambler financially, it can leave you with a bad credit report, and you may be liable for joint debts. Is that right, John?
Yeah, so if you've got joint credit agreements, you're both liable for those. So if you take out a joint loan, for example, what it could be is that you could be financially associated to someone. So whether this is your partner, for example, and if they're getting themselves in a slightly negative situation because of it financially on their credit report, if you applied for credit on your own, the lender can check that person's credit report, and that means it could impact the outcome of the decision. So yes, I guess it's always important to keep an eye on that. If there's nothing open together, joint accounts, then you can get that link removed, called a financial disassociation. But then I think obviously, although you've kind of financially distanced your credit reports, it's probably about how you can help that person recover as well. And part of that is, using the right methods that we've talked about in terms of lots of gambling blocks and blocking new applications for credit, which is important, and then getting free debt advice as well to try and help resolve their financial issues.
Probably checking your own credit report is really important, but can you check the gambler? So say your spouse is a gambler, is it possible to check their credit report?
Yeah, so you can't actually check someone else's credit report. So you can't kind of voluntarily just go to the agency and say, I want to have a look at, someone's credit report, for security reasons and data protection reasons, obviously. But there are ways to do it if you kind of, if you have their support to do it. You can, for example, contact the credit reference agencies like Experian and say, submit a third-party authority form where you could deal with their financial issues for them. So if that's the case, you can do that, and you can check their credit report or deal with any issues, things like adding a note of correction to stop new applications for credit. Then you can do that as well if you can deal with someone's issues. So it's something to think about as well.
That's very good to know, because we often recommend that for someone struggling with their gambling, they do get help from their loved ones with finances while they're in recovery. So that's really useful.
Yeah, very good. So we're just about to wrap up, but I just want to answer one question before we do, which Raminta, you sent through to us from your teams there, is about whether debt solutions show up on credit reports and whether they'll affect anything. So, I mean, the short answer to that is yes. More often than not, a debt solution will. A debt management plan won't, but a debt management plan is usually for someone who has multiple defaults or lots of negative information like missed payments already on the account. So there's going to be a lot of negative information there. So what I would is, if that's the case, Experian or credit reference agency can offer lots of advice, but free debt advice services as well can help you go through that. And the important thing is your report, or the information on your report, usually stays for about 6 years. So I know it seems like quite a long time, but if you do have anything like a debt management plan or any kind of debt solution like an IVA, it will be removed from your report at some point. So there's light at the end of the tunnel if that's the case, and if that's the right option for you, then that's the way you have to go. But at some point you'll come out of it and start recovering your credit report as well. So Raminta, we're just kind of wrapping up, but is there anything you just wanted to add before we finish off?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for inviting us for this talk. It's been really useful for us to find out more about gambling and credit reports and how gambling transactions may affect someone's credit file. But I would just like to say that COVID has obviously affected all of us, but it's really had an impact on the people who previously struggled with gambling, and also could have made the problem a lot worse for someone who may be isolated from family and friends, or finding themselves out of work, for example. So do get in touch with GamCare if you feel like gambling is becoming unmanageable and it is affecting your life. And thanks so much, John.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And Raminta, thanks to you and the GamCare team as well.